I'm Renee Savoy from the Connecticut State Department of Education in the Performance Office. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, or if you are watching the recording, thank you for taking the time to do so. This is our third in a series of webinars with our NACEP partners. This session is going to focus on student support and the student experience for concurrent enrollment and dual enrollment. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Amy Williams so that we can get started right away and move forward.
Thank you, Renee. Excited to be back for our third webinar with you. As Renee talked about, we're going to dig into mindsets that are helpful for working with students, whether we're talking about advising, supporting students that might need additional support or just basic support, and kind of how that all wraps into the student experience. And so, as you can see, if you've got the gallery pulled up like I have, you can see we've got a bevy of presenters today sharing some of their expertise, their insights, their mindsets that help move the work forward in their day-to-day process. And we hope that that's useful for you as well. Let's see, Renee, could you go to the next slide and I'll do a quick overview. So as we mentioned, this is the third webinar. We'll be back in November talking about how programs can use their data for goal setting and understanding who they're serving and who they could be serving. We also have an event this summer. We are excited to have the planning well underway for a Quality Institute, which will be a deep dive into some of these key topics, including things like partnership, student support, expanding access, managing program logistics. And so we hope to see you all there at the 2-day event. I believe we're August 13th and 14th, and details and registration will be coming out soon. From Renee and her team as well. And then anytime any of you have questions about how to run your program, how to take on a specific challenge, please know that we are here and are here to support. We'll have contact information for our team, which I've got myself, Diane Barker, as well as Andrea Roma joining today on the webinar. We can field those via email. You can drop them in the chat here today and we can circle back. We are happy and here to help. So with that said, we are exploring elements of the student experience, how to empower students with the knowledge, skills, and supports that they need. We've got our content broken into 3 different kind of pieces. We'll really start by focusing on empowerment of the students and giving them tools and skills that help them on their educational journey. Then we'll move into helpful mindset and advising strategies to help students navigate to and through these programs and their opportunities related to that. And then we'll dig in on student supports for a very specific and underserved group. This students with disabilities is, and I'm not going to give it away because we've got great presenters to talk about it, but it's definitely one of the most frequently asked questions that we get as an organization. So pulling together information to help empower practitioners that are working with these students, I think is an important first step for that. And I think in terms of, a helpful plug, we will have 2 of these presenters will be doing pre-conference workshops, half or full day pre-conference workshops at our national conference. So if you get a taste of something that you like, there's an opportunity to do a potential deep dive at our national conference as well. You can find details at nacep.org under events on our website. With that, I am happy to hand things off to a good colleague, friend, Anna Espinoza, to kind of share some of her work on empowering students and give you the lens that she brings to the work day to day.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Espinoza. I am just outside of Houston, and I have been in the dual enrollment world for a very long time. And it's interesting because I have experience in dual enrollment on the university level, the community college level, and now on the K-12 level. And I actually worked backward on that. I started at the university level and worked my way down, which gave me kind of a different perspective on the program and things to look for, because I saw problems. I saw the issues that came up for students on the backside, on that baccalaureate side. And so it made a true passion instill within me as I continued with my career, to the point where I actually did my dissertation research on dual enrollment. And you can see that at the bottom of the slide. It was a mixed methods study on the role of high school dual credit participation and transfer on baccalaureate student preparedness, their well-being, and their education outcomes. And so within that research, I looked at archival data across 4 cohorts of about 1,500 students, and then did 16 qualitative interviews. And so a lot of what I'm going to say today, it's a combination of what I've learned over my almost 20 years of experience with this, but it's also combined with some of those aha moments that I took away from those interviews, because, you know, there are things that we just don't know until we ask. And as I'm sure most of you know, getting alumni to come back and do an interview is really difficult. So I was happy to get those 16 and I learned a lot. So you can go to the next slide. So I wanted to start with just what is college readiness in general, because we, at least if you're in the K-12 world, we talk about college readiness all the time. And so essentially it is just being able to go to college without needing remedial or developmental coursework, depending on what you call it. That's a very simplistic definition, but sometimes it almost seems like that college readiness word gets thrown around a bit more than that. So next slide, please. So what does college readiness and dual credit have in common? They both promote higher education. They have similar target audiences. They have positive impacts on students, and they're going to save time and money in earning a degree. I don't know, you know, across the country we have different guidelines since there's not a lot of federal policy on dual enrollment, but where I'm at, you have to be completely college ready in order to take dual enrollment classes. So a lot of times it overlaps here in Texas, but those are just some of the things that they have in common. Next slide. So we can't just stop with college readiness. That's the word that we use so often and we hear it all the time, but college readiness is not enough. What are we doing to instill college preparedness into our students? And why should college readiness and dual enrollment work together? How do they empower the students? And so here's just a couple of statistics for you. I'm sure most of you know who John Fink is. They do great work at the Community College Research Center. And so they found that 88% of students who took dual credit matriculated to college after high school graduation. So 88% is an astounding number. I know in the district that I work in, we are the most successful program within the service area of the community college partner that we have. And we only have about 56% of our students that go on to college after high school. So, and out of that, I mean, those numbers are astronomically higher if they are in dual credit. So that statistic definitely rings true for us. Then I also wanted to throw in here that Miller in 2017 found that Texas students who took dual enrollment courses were more likely to graduate from college than those who never took dual credit classes. So not only are they matriculating, they are also being retained at higher rates once they get there. So that's why having that college readiness aspect and having that dual credit experience should be better preparing our students. The numbers say that they are, but on the next slide, I really want to talk to you about the framework that I created out of my research. And again, a lot of this is things that I saw with my own eyes. I'm also a product of dual credit classes. It was a very long time ago, and the programs have changed since then. But you know, I started out in that world as well. But then there were so many things that I never thought about. I had that aha moment, I guess you could say, when I did some of these interviews, because I thought I knew that in my mind, but I never truly thought about it beyond just that common knowledge. And so I'm a visual person. And so I had to develop something whenever I finished my dissertation so that it made sense to me. And so if we have that college preparedness at the center, because that college preparedness is really where we are empowering those dual credit students. We don't want them to just pass. You know, you'll hear students say C's get degrees, and while they do, we never want that to be the end goal. We want them to be prepared and we want them to be confident. And so the elements that I kept hearing throughout my research and throughout my career, obviously, you know, like I said, we do hear about college readiness. And what does college readiness mean? We've already talked about it means going to college without needing those remedial courses. But it goes beyond that a little bit. It talks about, college acceptance. Are you being admitted into college? I know in the district that I work in, we make it mandatory that every student is going to have some type of college application on file. We may know that they're not going, but they're going to at least have an application on file to the local community college. And so they think, they've proven here that helps, because a lot of times students may not realize what they want to do in the beginning, and they may go in May and have a plan, and then by August they don't have a plan. So if they already have that application on file, it makes it a lot easier for them to walk in August to the community college and go, I don't know where to start. Well, you've already done step one. So that is one aspect of college readiness. Another is college awareness counseling. So something that we've done here is we have partnered, and we'll talk about partnerships a little more in a minute, but we've partnered with our local community college, and we have shared positions now. And they've done this with other districts that they work with, where we both split the cost of, it's not an advisor, it's not a counselor, but it's somewhere in the middle. And her entire role is to help students get into college. And it doesn't have to be here. It could be anywhere across the country. But if you have a housing question, you go see her. If you have, a question about which meal plan might be best for you, there's no question too small or no question too big for her. And so that really, she starts building that relationship as toward the end of their junior year of high school. And so that really helps those students feel comfortable. She's embedded on that high school campus. She's there many days out of the week at each one. And so it really helps our students feel comfortable around her. Where, back I always say my first big girl job was as an admissions counselor for a university, and they were lucky if they saw me 3 times a semester. So it was hard to build that relationship because I had the entire eastern third of Arkansas that I had to travel. I knew many of them, but I wasn't able to build a true relationship. So thinking outside the box, finding some way to build the relationships to where students feel comfortable, and those things will help lead into that dual credit program. And then dual credit should help with the other 3 aspects that I found. And those are academic self-efficacy, student identity development, and the student soft skills. So if I start at the bottom with student identity development, those are some things that we can't change always. We can't always change the cultural perception of higher education. We can't always change your socioeconomic status or your living arrangements for going to college, but being able to identify what they are, come to the realization of what they are, and being able to work through it to show that whatever problems you have, we may have to monitor and adjust, but you can overcome it. And so having someone I think that helps with dual credit, because you're learning that aspect at 15, 16, 17 years old. And so you're getting kind of a leg up on the competition per se. And so that's one aspect. And then student soft skills and academic self-efficacy, they really go hand in hand. And when it comes to empowerment, that's really, we're in the South, so that's what we call the meat and the potatoes of college preparedness, because they can get that directly in those dual credit classes through the coursework expectations, through developing those study habits. Think back just yourselves. I know for me, it was a completely different world when I left high school and went to college. And I was very fortunate that I attached myself to my advisor and one of my professors very early on, because I was a first generation college student. And so I had help developing those. And my dual credit classes definitely helped me with that. And then also your academic self-efficacy. This is huge, because this is a lot of reasons why students do not persist, is they do not have that self-efficacy to not only be in a college classroom, but to be away from home for the first time. And that was one of the things that I learned a lot about. These students felt like they were very academically prepared, but where dual credit was missing the mark for them was with their social transition to college. And so campus resources and supports, student clubs and organizations, and I don't know about the accreditation in Connecticut, but here in Texas, we're accredited by SACS, And you are required to offer all of the same campus supports and everything to dual credit students. But there's a big difference in offering it and students really taking advantage of it. You know, many of our students are, at least here, you know, you may be 15, 20 minutes away from the local community college. So you may be taking classes at the high school. And so you don't have the access to get to where you need to go to obtain those the assistance from those campus resources and supports. So it's kind of marrying together the academic and the social transition to make sure that they have that self-efficacy, that confidence to be successful at the next step and being truly prepared for college. Next slide. And so how can we do that? And I can't say enough. I know you guys have talked a lot about partnerships in some of your previous webinars, but really the innovation comes from having a good partnership. You have to look beyond your needs and keep students at the center of your focus. And I say that because I have seen it on both sides of it. I have a very unique perspective because not only did I work backward in my career, but I also worked in the same partnership on both sides of it. And so I know the inner workings of what the community college or the university can do and what they can't do, and what the K-12 institution can do and cannot do. And sometimes they just don't work together. And it's not that you don't want to, but it's having that understanding of why. Why do you do what you do? Why can you not do what you say you can't do? And so finding that happy medium is where the innovation is located. Next slide. Oh, go back one. There we go. So I have 4 real implications that I found. I'm not going to go over 2 of them because we have true experts in those fields that are going to go over them. But I really want to focus a little bit on instructor training and transitional programming. And instructor training is something that is pretty near and dear to my heart. I've been a dual credit instructor as well. I have been a traditional adjunct instructor. And I can tell you they're not equally trained. And I'm not going to sit here and say that one is better than the other, but it's not the same. And so I think that there's a lot of things that we can do that will help the student experience by helping ourselves. So one of those things is what I found was that college or our dual credit students were having somewhat different experiences. And one of those, you know, college instructors are the students really appreciated that the college instructors, I heard the word difficult a lot in my research. So they said, but we appreciated that they were hard. You know, they gave us those strict deadlines. And so when we got to college, that part was a breeze. We knew we weren't going to get extensions. We knew that, you know, we were going to be told it's in the syllabus. You know, I think that was always my favorite line. It's in the syllabus. So college instructors are really, really strong with molding them into those adult students. High school students, though, and I never thought about this. This was that aha moment for me. With special populations, those students always talked about the high school dual credit instructor instead. They said, I appreciated that the high school teacher that taught my dual credit class was a bit more lenient. And I was coming from a college mindset. So I thought, no, we don't want to be lenient, you know, but do we? Should we learn from each other to find a happy medium somewhere? Because my students who had self-identified with ADHD said we needed to be taught. We couldn't just do a 180 and go from, you know, my high school teacher in my junior year of high school telling me, well, just get it to me before final exams. And then the next semester I start a college class and I'm told, if it's due October 12th, it's due October 12th. You better not give it to me on the 13th. And so they really struggled with that. And so I kept hearing that over and over again. And so I thought, wouldn't it be beautiful if we had some type of instructor training that goes beyond just your traditional training, your your convocation meetings and things like that, to really sit down and have your college instructors and your high school instructors that are teaching dual credit, have them really meet and learn from one another, those best practices. So that's one thing. The other thing is cross-divisional training. What I learned was that not all departments operate the same way. And so also training each other cross-divisionally on, an English professor may be really giving excellent soft skill preparation to someone in a project that they're doing. And that might be something that, a history professor could do the same thing, but they've never talked to one another to share those ideas. So those are just a couple things to think about with instructor training. The other thing is actually my recently former position before I was moved into a director role was something that I talked about innovation, and this is something we're not instructors, but I do want to tell you what we did. The reason I moved from community college to K-12 was because I did have that expertise in dual credit, and they wanted me to come over and teach the counselors. They never wanted me to have our counselors move in on those college advisors. That was never the point. The point was for me to be able to teach counselors just enough for them to have a good elevator speech for every topic so that we were never going to steer a child in the wrong direction. And I think that was really important, and it was very successful. So keep that in the back of your mind. And then the other thing, transitional programming. So how do we support the student transition to college? Just a couple of ideas that we have, that we use some of them here, and then also things that students told me they wish they would have had. Those were an exit orientation. Everything revolves around new student orientation and making sure that dual credit students are ready for their first class. But they're not going to have the traditional freshman year in college either. Many of them go to college as sophomores and juniors, and they're not ready for that. You can take all the core classes in the world, but you step foot into a junior level biology class and it's a whole new world for you. And so what kind of exit training are you going to give to those dual credit students to ensure that they have a little leg up when they get to the next phase of their educational journey? And then the other thing is, if you're on the university level, do they have a separate new student orientation? Do you also take where the community college and the secondary institution left off, and do you give them maybe a breakout session? Maybe, what's it like to transition as a dual enrollment student into a university? So think about those ideas, and I'm always happy to talk to you a little bit more about those independently if you want. Next slide, please. So just some ideas to think about. Questions. What is your team currently doing to prepare college prepared, or to promote college preparedness? What is your partner institution doing for the same goal? Because work smart. It may be that you have to complement one another instead of always working independently of one another. Are you duplicating any of the work? That's something that I've seen on both sides of the partnership that I'm currently in. There are so many things that we think, oh, we have to do this, we have to do this. Well, maybe the other team is better at that particular thing. And so really working together to making sure that you're not working too hard for the same goal. And so, like I said on the fourth bullet, is your current style in a silo, or are you being collaborative? And really the best advice I can give you on that is making sure that your partner and you are really dedicated to one another. You work through the good and the bad together. When I first started this role, I made sure that I was there as often as I could be there. And I said, you know what, you're going to like me whether you want to or not, because I am going to annoy you because I'm going to be here all the time. And that's how it started. And it was great. We got to know each other rather than just an occasional meeting. So next slide. And finally, for me, is just knowing some resources. And I'm not going to go through all of these with you because I want to be mindful of the time, but just so you know, you can always go back and access all of these. These are great organizations that you can Google if you are not familiar with them. There's resources at all different levels. So that's all that I have. So I am going to turn it over to Mary Stevenson, the Dean of Early College at the College of Eastern Idaho.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone. I am excited to be here. I'm just doing a quick mic check. Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. Thank you. So I'm excited to be here. We were, I was going to have Katie Fonsbeck with me today, and she is unable to make it. But so by way of introduction, again, I'm Mary Stevenson. I'm the Dean of Early College at College of Eastern Idaho. I've been working in the dual credit space for many years as well, and I feel very fortunate to be pretty involved. I feel like at NACEP as a presenter for many conferences. And if you want to go to the next slide, please, Renee. I just wanted to give everybody a little context. So first of all, College of Eastern Idaho, since you all are in Connecticut and I'm really far away, we're in Idaho Falls, which is about 2 hours away from Yellowstone National Park one way and about 2 hours away from Grand Teton National Park the other way. We serve this very, very big region. And I know that when people are talking about East Coast and West Coast, sometimes our spatial, the relationship we have with space is different. So we serve schools that are 3 hours in any direction. We have a lot of rural schools that we work with, things like that. But I wanted to start off with this slide. This is this we pulled off of the NACEP website. And you can see that in Idaho, even in 2019, and I would bet that this has increased a little bit, but we have a large portion of our students who take advantage of dual credit. And I think that that's an important part to understand. We have a unique funding model in Idaho called Advanced Opportunities that provides a little over $4,000 for all students in public school to take advantage of a variety of things. Most students use it for dual credit. So we charge a reduced amount of tuition, a reduced tuition rate to students, and then students can use their Advanced Opportunities funding to pay for it. So the funding part, we have really closed the gap on access because money is not what stands in the way for a student participating in dual credit. I also should just mention that we use the terms dual credit, dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, and early college all the time, kind of interchangeably. So if I interchange those as I go, I'm meaning the same thing. But as we've seen the participation increase because we have found a way to help students gain access, we've also really had to focus on what does that mean for student support services, because increased participation also means that we need to kind of up our game on the support service side. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So they asked us today to talk a little bit about advising strategies and then some mindsets. So just so you know a little bit of my background, I'm a dean now, but I started actually as a registrar that was dedicated to dual credit, moved into advising, and then I became a director. So I've kind of seen it from a lot of different angles, but advising is kind of where my heart lies. And even as a dean, I actually still do some advising appointments because I feel like the students keep us grounded. But one of the things that we do, you can see on this slide, this is our ecosystem when we talk about advising dual credit students, right? And the student is definitely in the center of what we are doing. We always try to keep the student in the center. So as we talk about strategies today, all of those things are kind of keeping that student focus. And I think that these things will be hopefully transferable to programs of all different sizes. We serve about 1,800 students across that large region. And I have a staff of 3. I think that's always important to kind of understand how people are utilizing the different staff that you have. But we're going to just move for the sake of time into these strategies. And then if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat for later. Thanks, Renee. So strategy number 1 is group advising. And the reason I started off with this is I get a lot of questions about group advising. How should you do it? How does it work? Who should do it? Where do you do it? All of those basic questions. People have a lot of questions. I'm also involved in what's called NACADA, which is a professional organization for collegiate academic advisors. And even among those professional advisors, group advising tends to come up about how to do it and how to do it effectively. So at the College of Eastern Idaho, and prior to me being at CEI, I was at Utah Valley University. So Anna, when you were talking about your history, I had the same thing, university. Now I'm at a community college. So but we have found that there are certain things that really fit well and really fit effectively into group settings. And one of the things that I want you to, that I would like you to encourage you to consider is that advising is kind of a spectrum. There's a time and a place for what we would call transactional advising, and a time and a place for transformative advising. And students often go through that whole spectrum. But the transactional things are the things that really work well in group advising. When I started doing advising appointments for students in high credit counts that were thinking about doing associate degrees or things like that, I was realizing quickly that the first half of all appointments is the same. And the second half of all appointments is really individual and tailored to the student's individual situation. So that first half information is what you can really do well in a group setting. These can happen in a lot of different places. You see the list here. We go into classrooms, we do parent nights. There's all kinds of things that we do. And some of these events that we do are not advising centric, but we sprinkle advising into the things that we were already doing. We know that from the college side of things, and the high school as well, but from the college side, we sometimes have departments of one in concurrent enrollment. And so bandwidth is a real concern. Like, how am I also going to be an advisor on top of the other things that I'm doing? And so trying to figure out like how you can kind of sprinkle advising into things that you're already doing is a great strategy to have. And it also, whether you're going shallow with the information or going really deep, I think that one of the things about group advising and sprinkling that information about what an advisor is, how that might be different from a high school counselor, kind of giving some baseline to that, is that you're creating knowledge for that student that that's an expectation that is one of the things that's going to be different when you transition to college. So getting students used to the terminology and things like that. If you can go to the next slide, please. So this is, that transactional role. So sometimes there's a time and a place for that transactional advising. And I've met with lots of people over the years that when we talk about, well, what are we doing? And they just don't maybe realize that they are offering some level of advising. The other thing that I would encourage you to kind of look at is when we say 58% of students in the state of Idaho are taking dual credit, you kind of have to dig deeper into the numbers. The average student is taking about 9 or less credits of dual credit in high school. And so that student is kind of living in that transactional space, right? And they're probably not, they don't have the need to see an advisor face to face. Of course they can, but they don't necessarily need to. So you have to kind of figure out the boundaries that you want to have and what you have, the expectations you have for students. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So with those group advising appointments, back to that question of, well, how can you do it and where do you do it? So we have found that because that information that we give in group settings is very general, that we can really expand our scope about who can deliver those messages. So the college staff at CEI were very hands-on in creating those messages, but we deliver them, and then we also really utilize our partnerships to also be continually sending out consistent messaging to students. And so sometimes we're partnering together. I just did a session at a parent session for at one of our larger high schools for students who were interested in the idea of an associate degree, and we partnered to do that together. And so I think you really have to leverage your partnership in order to reach those students. As I said, we have 1,800 students in our program and we have 3 employees. And so we can't meet every one of those students on an individual basis. But certainly we can create the partnerships and the trust with the people who will meet with them on a daily basis or see them to broaden your reach a little bit. If you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is just, I always encourage people to be intentional, right? There's sometimes things are happening that you can just sprinkle those advising notes inside, but also you can do very intentional things for advising. So student orientations, at our college, our healthcare programs are our biggest programs. And so there's a lot of healthcare information and different things going on. And we try to partner with those events to try to invite dual credit students in. We also have created some documents with our healthcare divisions that talk about, hey, if you want to go into nursing, these are the 5 things that we would recommend that you do in high school if you're interested in getting into the program at our college, things like that. So we really partner. And then certainly if you have students that are interested in high credit count, that's a great reason to do a big group, a group session. And then we do also do things in Spanish a lot on our campus, because we know that parents have questions, but we want to help parents from our Hispanic community be comfortable in what their students are doing and have a place that they can ask questions. So those are just those general things. Now, I will say at the end of group advising, we always have a call to action of, hey, so now if this information has been interesting to you, your next step is to make that one-on-one appointment with an advisor so that we can go on to the more deep information that is going to be tailored to a unique student. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so strategy number 2 is providing that one-on-one advising. Again, I think some people are like, oh, we have to do it at the campus or we have to do it at the high school. I think that at least for most programs that I've been exposed to over the years, you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to do it in the places where the students are. And sometimes that is going to schools and doing them on your campus too. But one thing I wanted to point out to you on the one-on-one advising is kind of the idea that when you have students who are coming into a college advising office, those conversations are going to be a little bit different. Or if the college advisor is at your high school, same thing. And the graph that you're looking at here is something called appreciative advising. And college advising has a lot of well-studied and well-researched theories of practice that a lot of professional advisors really follow. And so one of my pieces of advice and strategies, if you do have one-on-one advising, is to seek out those resources that will help you become a better advisor. So because some of you might be in an office of one or a very small office, sometimes you might be asking someone to take on some advising duties that's not their primary role, but there needs to be some training that happens so that all of the people who are working with students can be doing what's best for them. So Amy gave a little plug earlier, but I will tell you that at the pre-conference for NASEP in Orlando this fall, we'll be doing a full-day workshop on advising theory and true professional development for practitioners. So that'll be a great way to learn about motivational interviewing and also how to help students who are in academic warning and different things like that. There's a lot of professional resources for the people who work in that advising space. You can go to the next slide, please. So back to, on this slide, we talk about the idea of that partnership. So I just said that students often need to see a college advisor, and it needs to be someone who's trained. But the fact is that students who are in dual credit are doing more than one thing, right? Amy wrote a beautiful thing that I've referenced several times since I saw it, that talk about dual credit being the third space in education. And so we are kind of that middle space where people, the students need us to work together, and it is all about partnership. So there are times when students definitely need to be getting their information from the college and also from the high school. And then we all have to be able to share that information effectively back and forth across the lines. So one thing that we have done that has been really effective at our college is we do have a dedicated advisor. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But we hold monthly advising hours at some of our high schools. If that's something that works well for them, we have a standing day like first Monday of the month or whatever it is, where our college advisor goes out to that high school and holds office hours. And then we also do things by Zoom and all kinds of different things. But those in-person office hours make a big difference for students. We also have parents that come to that because they're on a regular schedule. So parents are able to come. And it also really helps us solidify those partnerships that we have with our high school partners. They understand what's being said during advising appointments and things like that. So I think it really boosts the confidence. One thing I will say though is that I think that it's really important to kind of set those boundaries and define when handoffs should happen, because we all are trying to help the student, but we also don't want to confuse the student by feeling like we're stepping on each other's toes. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So when you establish those partnerships, just kind of think about what is your bandwidth. For me, when we have schools that are 3 hours in one direction and 3 hours in another direction, we can't be in all of those places. I would love to be in all of those places in every high school we have once a month, but that's probably not going to happen. So how can we train the high school partners that we have? How do we identify that person in the high school who is our champion of students that can help us provide great advisement for those first 9 or 10 credits that a student does? And then creating those handoff points, I think, is important. You can see here on the slide that in the state of Idaho, along with our funding model, there's a requirement that students have to be advised when they hit 15 credits, but it doesn't say who has to give the advisement. And so that's something we partner with individual schools to really we solidify the expectations of what we would like to have happen. So you can see here for us, what we've designed at CEI is those handoff expectations. Any student can see a college advisor at any point. We have open advising that people can come and see. But when students hit 15 credits, they really should be seeing a college advisor. And when they hit 25 credits, they must. And that's really because on the college side, when you start getting into those kinds of credit counts, your discussions with students really start to change. You're talking about bachelor's degrees, you're talking about things down the road, and they have to be looking a little bit further. You also want to make sure that you have a great way to share data back and forth and that you're transparent with the students about who might see a plan. So in our office, we often make 3 or a 4-year plan with a student that is aimed at their goals. And we always let them know that we'll be sharing that with their counselor. The counselors know that they can get that from us at any time, but you want to think about how you might want to share that information. Next slide, please. Okay, so next is talking about dual credit dedicated advisors. And I know that this is sometimes that thing that everybody goes, oh, again, I'm an office of one. How do I justify an advisor? How do I do that? It's great, and it's something I believe in, to have dedicated advisors, but also I know that bandwidth-wise, sometimes you have to be creative. I know schools who will cross-train recruitment advisors or admission counselors to do some dual credit advising. There may be some people in your main advising office that can be trained to do this, and then certainly you can give training to the high school partners that might be able to help deliver that message. I really liked what Anna said earlier. I really do think that one of the things that happens with college advising, quality college advising, is that students find their person. Colleges are full of resources that are underutilized. And so if a student can connect with someone early on, and if we can do that in a dual credit setting, then their likelihood of using resources as they go along is going to be greater. They're going to have more confidence and just be able to be it'll help them through that transition period that we know is really, really important. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so the fourth strategy part we wanted to talk about is just the importance of creating visible goals. And visible is, I feel like visible and ecosystem are my lines for this year, because it's the things that I keep saying over and over. But students and parents are goal oriented. They want to know what they can do, what they can earn, what they can experience. And so I think it's really important to be visible about what the possibilities are. It also really helps in an advising session to lay some options out to drive a conversation. We have a lot of first generation students in our area. So parents will come in to an advising appointment with a student and they don't know what questions to ask. The students don't know what questions to ask. So having some basic goals prepared that we can kind of jump off of is really helpful. And then being really, as I said, visual about that. So this is just an example of what we do. We talk to students a lot about, hey, if you're going to take dual credit, we really want you to make intentional course decisions. And I do think students are making intentional course decisions, but we want to help them tie their goal, those decisions to a goal. So we talk about getting ahead. We have a really big nursing program. So we have a lot of students in dual credit who are interested in getting ahead, but also how can those things aim them to a program. So we talk about program prerequisites. And then we have a 1-year completion, and then of course the associate degree. So, but if you're visual, if you create things in a visible way, it really can help the comfort level of those students and drive those conversations for them. Next slide, please. Okay, so we just wanted to finish up talking a little bit about the unique mindset that sometimes people need to recognize when they're working with dual credit students. And so again, for this, we're using that same graph of students in the center, but what are some of the unique aspects that come up when we're talking about dual credit students? So if you'll go to the next slide, please. So interesting, right? Again, that third space of education. So college advisors, a traditional advisor, is not always going to understand maybe some of the things that are going on in that high school realm and why students are making decisions. And then high school counselors are doing, they may not understand the other side of that. So those dual credit, those dedicated people to help understand the middle ground is really, really important. You guys can read this slide, but the one thing that I wanted to focus on is that level of academic preparedness. So with matriculated students, of course, they've completed their foundational high school education. And with dual credit students, that is not complete. So having good resources and a good understanding of how we can help students make great decisions that aim them toward their goals is really important. An example of this, we bring up foundational education all the time. In our state, we do allow students in 10th grade to take a dual credit class. But we also allow students to come on our campus when they're 16, which means that we do have 16-year-olds on our campus. And so, but what we don't want to do is have a student take a class. We don't have a prerequisite on many of our classes on campus, right? So if you wanted to come in and take a cultural anthropology class, you could do that without a prerequisite. But I don't know if that's a great idea if you haven't had a lot of high school English yet. So you really have to have someone who's kind of helping monitor those things where they understand how to have those conversations with students to help them stay motivated and be able to access things early, but also feel good about taking some time when they need to and completing foundational steps. So we talk about those kind of things a lot. And then finally, if you'll go to the next slide, the other thing that's unique about dual credit advising, so if you're thinking about adding it to your program or you're just trying to put it into words, how you might justify it to be able to add it is it's just such a unique space. As you guys know, and everyone on here probably is working with dual credit in some regards. So this is a very complex space with students who are doing things for often more than one reason. So there's simple things that are different, right? But there's also just really complicated conversations sometimes that you have to have with a student who's already very young to be having that conversation. So having someone who's really prepared to do that and maybe do it in steps and maybe do it in a lot of different sequential meetings, things like that is important. But we put this up just so that you could kind of verbalize what are some of those differences. So advising load is one of the things that I think is interesting. So at a lot of college campuses, any matriculated student is going to be required to meet with an advisor at least sometime. But in dual credit, we don't really require that until they get to a higher credit count. And so that in itself kind of makes a unique situation. And so having some dedicated advisors, counselors, partnership, all of us that can understand that language and help students through is really important. That breadth of knowledge that the people who work in dual credit as an advisor is really wide. So I think that that's something that just to be recognized and understand that those are some of the pressures that are on the people who work as a dual credit advisor. So And then just to close before I hand it off, just be prepared. I would say as a mindset in general, growth mindset is a very important thing for anyone who works as a dual credit advisor, probably in any space in dual credit. But there's a lot of things changing all the time and there's so much to keep up on. So just knowing that finding people who are really dedicated to keeping students at the center and helping them make those intentional course decisions, and then also helping them flex through decision changes is important. And I'm sure that, I mean, it's a very rewarding space to be in, but it's very unique as a dual credit advisor to be working with families and students all at the same time. But it's something that we all should be doing. Students are doing more and more credit all the time. And so we need to help them do it successfully so that they're really getting the benefit of the confidence that they get from their experience. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Carla. She's next. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Mary. Let me introduce myself, and mainly because I think you'll find I'm coming to this work very differently from our other presenters. As you can see on this slide, I'm Carla Phillips Kravickas. That's my daughter, Vanessa. I have about 25 years of state and federal education policy experience from preschool, K-12 to higher ed, governor's office, legislative, State Department, some national foundations, and I'm currently a member of the state board. But throughout that journey, I gave birth to some beautiful kids. One with ADD and my daughter with Down syndrome. And so throughout time, the past really 16 years, I started seeing the void of the applicability of all the policies we've worked on, anything from assessments to dual credit, anything, and how students with disabilities were applied. So I started my own company. I'm now the president of Inclusive Strategies, and this is what I'm doing. But the funny story is actually the dual credit story. And this is a true story. I don't even know if Amy's heard this story. I literally was sitting at my desk like 3 or 4 years ago, still working for a national foundation. And I was just checking Twitter. And a bunch of reports nationally had been put out on dual enrollment. And I very innocently tweeted out, how are these going to apply to students with disabilities? And long story short, the next thing I knew was I got an opportunity from the College and High School Alliance to write the first report on this topic. So I always say, watch what you ask for. And so I wrote that report, a companion piece to their state framework. And then I was asked to do a specific piece for Colorado and Rhode Island, and doing some now in my home state of Arizona. So I kind of stumbled into this work and have a very different perspective. Go ahead, next slide. I'm going to just jump into some stats. If you haven't seen them, they're kind of depressing, but I think it's important to level set. And this is national data. These are the percent of students with disabilities that are taking these types of advanced programs. And I will tell you the dual credit in my home state of Arizona was so low in the last report that it couldn't even be reported, meaning it was less than 2% statewide. So the N size was so small. So this is certainly an important topic. Go ahead. This is some data by our friend John Fink. I love the shout out we gave John earlier that John did for me in the College and High School Alliance. And this is comparing the percent of kids you have served with under IDEA or having an IEP compared to how many are participating in dual enrollment. And I did some green arrows there for you for Connecticut, so you can see where your states lie. And of course, you guys all have access to our slides, so you can look at it deeper. Go ahead. This came from Connecticut, from the state website already. And first of all, a big shout out to Connecticut for even asking this question and reporting, collecting this data for high needs. You can see the disparity there. But interestingly, go ahead, next slide. If you break out that group high needs into the kind of the groups that make up high needs, you see a very different picture. And you see your students with disabilities in Connecticut are at about a 5% participation rate. Go ahead. Now I'm going to throw some statistics at you just because probably the very first lesson I've learned in this new work I've endeavored the past couple of years is realizing that unless you are personally affected by a child or family member with disability, or you work in the industry somehow, you probably know little about it. So it's really become a really big part of my work is helping people just understand what is special ed, who's in it, what do they look like. So I'm going to throw some quick stats at you really quick. Go ahead. About 15% of students have a disability, and that's nationally. The number in Connecticut was a little bit higher, But 15% is a pretty big number, and that does not include the students who have 504s, which I'm not going to go into really big difference, but these are students who have IEPs under IDEA, Individualized Education Programs under federal law. Go ahead. I always think it's important to remind people that disabilities don't discriminate. So when your state or your school has an initiative to help Latino students, right, or help African American students, Native American students, all races and ethnicities experience disability equally. So I think that's always an important piece to remember. Go ahead. And students don't outgrow their disabilities. This has surprised a lot of my higher ed friends. So I'll hear from them, well, but they had an IEP, but maybe they don't. You have a disability your whole life. You may not need certain strategies or therapies, or you've acquired strategies and therapies that have helped you deal and cope, so you don't need them anymore, but you always have a disability. You never outgrow it. And that has been surprising even for me as a parent, quite frankly, on a couple of issues. Go ahead. Most students receiving special education have invisible disabilities, which we're going to see in a few minutes, some more, but I think just put a plug in that. They're invisible. Go ahead. The majority of students, that statistic, just so you know, nationally, about 70% of students with IEPs in high school, in K-12, are in regular classrooms, where often we think of those kids in those classrooms down the hall. And quite frankly, that's how it was for a lot of us when we were in school. The vast majority are in regular classrooms. They have invisible disabilities and they're there. Go ahead. One more. And because of that, we know that the lion's share, probably about 85% of students with disabilities in K-12 can learn and achieve on grade level with the appropriate supports. Go ahead. This slide always even rubs me wrong, but I feel like it's so important because it's become so clear to me as I've worked on this over the past couple of years that these are the images that people have of special ed. It's autism, it's Down syndrome, it's wheelchairs, it's hearing impaired, visually impaired. And we reinforce this with the pictures that we use in reports and on websites all the time. Go ahead. But this is truly what most kids with disabilities look like. These are the invisible disabilities. These are the kids that are frustrated, they're bored, they're unengaged, and they're checking out because they have disabilities like speech language impairments, ADD, a reading disability. And these kids are in every classroom in America. Go ahead. This is Arizona data, but it's virtually identical nationally. And I'm not going to have you, squint. You can look later, but you see the three big pieces that are kind of called out. If you put those together, those are 67%, meaning 67% of students have those invisible disabilities like learning disabilities and dyslexia, like a speech language impairment or ADD, ADHD. Go ahead. And I love when I've really appreciated everything that the presenters before me have offered, because every issue that they have highlighted or teased out is applicable to students with disabilities. It's just the approach is a little bit different, right? So this is kind of the typical Venn diagram of dual enrollment, right? And the whole reason we're having this type of presentation today is because of trying to figure out what that space looks like in the overlap, right? Where the two overlap, and that's really where dual enrollment lives. But here's an interesting thing that you may not know. Under federal law, if students have IEPs, when they turn 16, and in some states 14, they have to begin to integrate a transition plan with specific college and career goals, as well as the services and supports and courses that they're going to take to help them achieve those goals. This is where dual enrollment is supposed to live. Even the U.S. Department of Education Transition Guide says that dual enrollment is a critical piece that we are really leaving off the table. Dual enrollment should be built into students' IEPs. And then at that point, now we've opened the door, even legally, for the K-12 and higher ed staff to work more collaboratively in these disability space and negotiating those accommodations. Because really the goal is we want them, and I appreciate again, I can't remember who said it earlier, we want them to get to the college ready to hit the ground, right? So if those accommodations, these conversations happen during dual enrollment, that is in fact what can happen. But often what happens is a student with a disability, somebody in high school said, oh, you got to go to that one building called the disability place and self-register and accommodate. Now, especially in the university land, I always joke, this is after they've been, rushing fraternities, going to parties, trying to figure out where their classes, and then like halfway through the first semester, they go, oh crud, I don't have accommodations, and now they're underwater. But if you use dual enrollment as a transition goal built into the IEP, they can hit the ground running and they're not as overwhelmed. They don't have to do all those activities already kind of done. Go ahead. This is probably the issue that I want you guys to think about the most, is that the debate that I continue to hear nationally, and this debate is different from state to state for one reason. I want to touch on something that I know you guys already all know. Dual enrollment, dual credit is defined differently in every state. In my home state of Arizona, dual enrollment student is a high school student taking that class on the high school campus. Okay, and I know that's different from state to state. But the question always comes back to that Venn diagram. Well, it's a college course only. We only have to worry about ADA. First of all, I'm not sure by that argument legally, but there's nothing in federal law that prevents you from going above and beyond. ADA, IDA, all these acronyms for people with disabilities were part of the civil rights movement. It was about providing accessibility. It wasn't about providing, oh, these are the minimum things that anybody ever has to do for anybody with a disability. It's saying this is the minimum that you have to do. But the conversation we should be having, which is what we're having nationally for all students, right, is what do we need to do to help students succeed? How do we improve retention rates? How do we improve transition rates? How do we improve graduation rates? So the question we should be having is, what can we do to help them succeed? Not what is the bare minimum requirement that we're required under law. And again, the legal argument is different from state to state. In Arizona, because they are still high school students, I argue IDA still applies. And I'm going to use that to transition to this slide. So in Arizona, what I'm telling folks is IDA still applies in a dual enrollment course. However, the community college can decide not to give credit. For example, so in K-12, there's a very big distinction between accommodations and modifications. Accommodations, which you're all familiar with, how do we kind of even that playing field? And you like that little picture, right? How can we just make sure that they can all get to that bar? Modifications is when you're actually changing content or outcomes, right? That is something that higher ed typically does not do. I don't think they ever do. These are very different in K-12. But I think the problem is often we conflate these terms when we're talking about dual enrollment. If a student is receiving accommodations, there should be no question, and they're given credit. However, if a student needs modifications, they can still take that course, especially if it's on their high school campus, and the college can decide not to give credit. And I use the example of my own daughter. She's in high school. I'm already working with her high school to have her take ASL through the community college as dual credit, because of course the high school doesn't offer ASL, very few do. So for us, it's about a really cool access opportunity. We have a community college just a couple miles away that offers American Sign Language. If she needs, and I'm anticipating she will, she has an intellectual disability, significant modification, she will still take that credit. She will still get it for a high school credit, but she won't get the college credit, and that's fair. But I want to make sure that the colleges really understand that that is really one of the things, even especially under accreditation guidelines, that you can determine is if there's been significant modifications to content or intended outcomes, you can choose not to give credit. Whew, that's a lot. And I know I'm talking really fast because I know we're sensitive on time, and I want to make sure that everybody has time to throw in questions as well. Go ahead. And that's why I want to come back to this one. So if you squint really hard and you look at the top, there's a little yellow one that says 5%, and that's intellectual disability. And that's what child with Down syndrome has, intellectual disability. That's the category they fit in. But I want you to see how small that number is. So the perception, going back to those myths, is that every student with a disability has a cognitive impairment. The best estimates are that is at the most, maybe 10 to 15%, because there are some kids with autism that may also have a cognitive impairment, etc. So if you flip that, that means 85% do not. And again, if you go, can you go back one slide again? It's only the students with a cognitive impairment that are typically going to need these modifications, meaning that the lion's share of students with disabilities only need accommodations. So these ideas, these fears that we're going to have to make these significant changes to accommodate students is for a very slim percent. And let's also bear in mind that you all saw the data, only 4% of students with disabilities are taking these courses at all. And I think if we were to dig down, I think we'd all agree it's probably the kids with ADD, dyslexia that are even trying to. So we're not even in this modification conversation yet, but yet this is the red flag that goes up, or the fear. But I think it's important to dwell on that. And so we can really feel more comfortable about engaging these conversations and not worry about those modifications quite yet. Go ahead, forward one more time. Again, I'm not going to ask you to squint. You can look later at but remember those images I had of the kids that we think are in special ed, autism, hearing, visually. If you put those all together, it's less than 15% of special ed. So you think about that. And again, nobody ever admits this to me publicly, although a few friends have, that those are people's images of special ed. But if those are your images of special ed, you're only thinking about 15% of the population. And the problem with that is if you think that's who's in special ed, and this affects a lot of policymakers, a lot of legislators I work with who will take me privately and say, wow, I didn't know that. If you think that special ed is comprised of those really significant disabilities primarily, you think it's really expensive, you think it's really hard, and you have really low academic expectations. So that's why one of my missions in life is really to help people get a better image and perspective of who has an IEP, what does special ed really look like, because the vast majority don't look like what we think they do. Go ahead again. And this is my favorite quote. This comes from a gentleman named, I could probably never pronounce, Hari Srinivasan. He was the first non-speaking gentleman with autism to graduate Berkeley, and last I knew he was a PhD student at Vanderbilt. I think he now describes himself as minimally speaking autistic. And this is a student, and it still brings me teary-eyed even when I look at this quote, that this was his whole life. This is a kid who's a PhD student now at Vanderbilt, but his whole life he felt like it was candy that he couldn't access. So I would just encourage us to really start to break down those myths in our head and ask the question, not what are we required to do, but what can we do? What is the most we can do to help our students succeed? And I think that's it for me. I throw this out there because I really do. Send me those questions that you're too afraid to ask. You may be embarrassed to ask because you don't know, but I really want to help break down those myths and help you address these students in your school. So please feel free to email me at any time, and I'm going to pass it off to Kimberly. Kimberly is the program manager from college, from Georgia, and she's going to tell us her perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really hard to be the last one after such amazing presenters. So I jotted down a couple of things that I felt were really important and really kind of tie in with my presentation and the things that I'm going to talk about. And I just want you, I'm going to just kind of go over a couple of the notes that I took from the previous presenters, and I want you to think about these things as we go through my slides. And I promise I'll keep it brief, but a couple of things that really resonated with me from each of the slides: cross-training, collaboration, student-centered. And the one that I really love was in the, I think, the appreciative advising, which was don't settle. And I love that so much. That goes, I think, for every one of us, our students, and just like Carla said, the minimum versus success, what we really can do, we really shouldn't settle. Having visible goals, invisible disabilities, mindset. Our first presenter, when she talked about some of our students with disabilities having their favorite instructor or teacher being that on the college campus. Images of what we think students with disabilities look like versus what they really are. Disabilities don't discriminate. And I think as we move into my presentation, I hope that you'll keep an open mind, because Sometimes I think we have just this thought that our students with disabilities are going to be too hard to work with. They're going to require a lot of extra work. Do we really want them on our campus? So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about that. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the things that is helpful for your students and your parents to know. And I came from Chattahoochee Technical College before moving on to the state office at the Technical College System of Georgia. And I worked one-on-one with our students with disabilities. I worked on a college campus for about 15 years, and that also included our dual enrollment students. And I've seen such success stories. And so moving forward, and you can go on to the next slide. These are just some things that I think are important to think about as we think about who do we want in our dual enrollment programs, which is all of our students. We want to be equitable, but it really is a great option for students with disabilities. I think sometimes it's not that we don't want them to be here, we forget about them, or we don't think that, you know, hey, we should really start marketing to these students. We should include them in our programming. We should talk to high school counselors and say, you know, students with disabilities have an equal opportunity to participate in coming on campus at the college level and participating too. You know, really working together, your high school, your post-secondary, working together, attending transition meetings. One of the things that's really important when you're talking about students going from high school to college and switching kind of in between those campuses is really understanding what's going to be required and how we market that. Getting everyone on your campus involved in making sure that students with disabilities are included in everything. And we have that opportunity to encourage participation by making sure that we provide instructors, students, parents with up-to-date information, policies, and procedures, because I think sometimes we forget that sometimes students and parents, this may be their first experience on a college campus. You don't know what you don't know, so they don't always know what to ask, or they may make the assumption that, well, it was like this on the high school campus, it's going to be like this in college. And there really are some differences, but the more we know and the more we can, you know, work with both sides, high school and college, parents and counselors and those advisors and everyone in between, making sure we all have a good understanding of what the process is, what's going to be expected. Okay, next slide. So again, we have to work together. You know, it's not just one person's responsibility. And I think the transition planning, working together, you've got students, parents, high school counselors, disability services or accessibility services, faculty and staff. We all play a role in making sure that student has that highest level of success. I love Carla's slide when she said, you know, here's the minimum, but here's what we want to do to make sure that we have success. And that means we all have to work together. Again, I worked on a college campus for a lot of years, 15 years to be exact. And one of the things that I heard a lot that really just irritated me, I'm a pretty upbeat and positive person, so it takes a lot to really irritate me. But I would have instructors come to me with, you know, a student, and they'll be like, oh, it's one of your students. Y'all know what I'm talking about. It's one of your students. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to mess with it. Oh, you deal with that. That's yours. And I hate that, because that is our student. Just because a student has a disability doesn't mean that, hey, only one person on campus can deal with them. It means that we're going to surround that student and we're going to work together to provide everything they need to make sure that they're successful. So it's not just one person's responsibility when you're working with a dual enrollment student with a disability. And I think we forget that sometimes. We get in our own space, and this could probably go for a lot of different areas where, you know, oh, well, I don't know about that. Let me send it over to this person. And we pass that student around, and the student really kind of gets frustrated with that. So just thinking about working together as a team, finding out who you can partner with and understanding the process and what needs to happen so that you can fully support that student when they're on your campus. Okay, next slide. So there are a few differences, and you probably have heard, you know, sometimes the differences between, you know, what happens on the high school campus, what happens on the college campus, and really what happens when, you know, they're in that space. I think I saw a slide that said, we're not dueling, we're dueling. And this, you know, is kind of how this is too, because it's going to be a little bit different. But I think as long as students know, parents especially, sometimes they, as they should be, and I have college kids myself, and they were in dual enrollment, we are protective of our students. And we do think, you know, we know things, and sometimes maybe there might be a few differences that we might not understand. So making sure parents and students understand that there are going to be some differences, knowing ahead of time so people aren't caught off guard, knowing that, you know, students do have to disclose they have a disability, and they're going to have to provide that documentation. There's going to be an accommodation plan, and that is a little bit different than the IEP, although they're very common. You may see some differences in services that are provided or accommodations that are provided, but if students and parents know about that going in, they can be proactive and make a plan. And that's one of the things I saw a lot is we had students that would come in and they just didn't know, and they're halfway through the semester and they're making the assumption that they have accommodations and they don't. And then, you know, you're really just trying to catch up, and we don't want students to be in that place. We want them to be as successful as possible. Parents, again, should be informed of that ahead of time, and students really should have an active role in the process. Okay, next slide. And I'm gonna talk fast here, guys, so I apologize for that. What helps you on your, you know, where you are? What do you need to know? What does your student and parent need to know? And really, it's important, you know, once that student is on the college campus, what are those campus resources that's going to help support that student? It's not just disability services or accessibility services. Are there resources on campus that if a student has difficulty with, you know, maybe they need a book and audio format, or maybe they need tutoring, or something in support services that isn't even really related to a disability? Who do you know on your campus that can provide that resource for student? Teaming up to ensure the student is successful. So if an instructor sees that a student is struggling, you know, talk with the student, get accessibility involved, make sure you form a team to help that student. You don't have to do it on your own. It's really important, I think, to help faculty understand the types of disabilities they may encounter in the classroom. I love what Carla had to say, that, you know, we have a lot of invisible disabilities. I think sometimes people assume the student's going to be in a wheelchair, or, you know, it's going to be a visual, something that you see, you know, they have a disability, but there are so many more disabilities out there. And one of the things that I think is really important for us to understand too is sometimes we may have students that have a mental health diagnosis. And I will be doing the suicide prevention presentation at the pre-conference. But one of the things I think that goes along with that mental health diagnosis is people automatically make assumptions about that. And I always say it's really important to when you look at someone or you look at your student, you know, we never really know how it, you know, what they've had to do to get to where they are. We don't know what happened to them before they're standing in front of us. So we need to be, you know, not making assumptions about our students. Again, understanding why accommodations are necessary and how they work to ensure that our students have equal access to the classroom. And again, it's not just about, oh, checking the box, this is what we have to do. It's about helping that student be successful and making sure they have equal access, you know, in any classroom, but especially promoting them and making sure that they are able to participate in dual enrollment. Okay, next slide. Best practices, making sure if you're a faculty member, making sure that, you know, students know exactly where to go for accessibility issues or concerns. So making sure that information is readily available on your college campus. Allowing time to meet with the student to really review that accommodation plan. That might be a little bit different because I think on the high school campus, it's just kind of, I know you have meetings to discuss it, but sometimes it's hard for a student to talk about an accommodation plan with someone they don't know or haven't met before. So really giving them that safe space to talk about what those needs are going to be. making sure you have an environment that respects and values diversity and is accessible. Sometimes I think we forget that just because a student might have a physical disability, they may not need an accommodation. But you can make an accommodation by making your room accessible. A student shouldn't have to ask you to widen an aisle so they can fit their wheelchair down that aisle. You want to look at your classroom and look at your space and say, what can I do that would make this welcoming to everyone without someone having to say, I need this or I need that. So just making sure that it's accessible, being available to your students, and confidentiality is going to be really important. You don't want to talk about their accommodations in front of other people, so giving them that space. Next slide. Providing, sometimes we have situations where instructors may not want to provide an accommodation. They may say, well, there are a lot of reasons why, but making sure that you're working with your faculty to make sure that the accommodation has been approved by Disability Services and that's carried out in the classroom. If you have any questions, if you're working with a student and they have concerns and maybe they don't want to go to someone on the college campus, maybe they come back to their high school contact, but making sure that you stay in touch with your accessibility coordinator and building that bridge of communication. So if there is an issue, it's caught ahead of time. Being open-minded, I think we all could use that reminder for everything in life, is just being open-minded and not making an assumption that just because the student has a certain type of disability, they're not going to be successful. I have lots of examples where we've had students. I had a student, well, I won't tell you any stories, but I've had lots of students where I've had, people say, well, they'll never make it in that class. And I'm like, but they will. We are going to give them that opportunity. We're going to give them that equal access to education. We're going to make sure that they have their accommodations and they are successful. We just have to have that open mind. Never tell a student they can't participate in a program because they have a disability. Again, that's just having that open mind and not just making that assumption that because a student has a disability, they can't participate. All right, next slide. Questions. I think I made it close to time. I kind of rushed through that, but if you have questions, I think my main point is just, working with your team, making sure students understand the process as well as parents, keeping that open mind, and don't settle. I love that, not to settle. And I will pass it back over to Amy.
Thanks, Kim, for that lightning round. Through today. Thanks to all of our presenters. We are happy to take any questions that folks want to drop in the chat. We've also dropped in contact information, both for our NACEP team as well as our presenters for follow-up if you've got them. And I just wanted to come back and yes, thank you, Renee. And next slide, please. Just a reminder for anybody who is attending with the Institution of Higher Ed, if you have not completed the program landscape survey, we kindly and respectfully request that you take some time to do that. We put together a QR code for you to do that. That just helps us get a little of the context and the landscape of what's going on in the higher ed space with these programs as we look at building the content for our Quality Institute. Next slide. Just a reminder that we've got an upcoming event and upcoming webinar way out in November, which seems like a million miles away, but we'll be here before we know it. As we all know, time flies when you're having fun. So August 13th and 14th, we are nailing down the final details for that, and we'll send out, actually Renee's team will send out registration information. And so I encourage you all to bring as many of the interested parties in your high school, your district, your institution, in your system office that you want to listen and learn and dig in and start to do some planning and analysis of your program. Next slide. And just a reminder, this was actually discussed several times. Our registration is open for our national conference. We plugged a few of the pre-conference programs that we've got there, including advising and working with students with disabilities, but that's not all we have. So you can dig into the chat or jump on our website and learn more about what we're offering. We've got one more webinar coming up in June and are booking a few more. So you can always cruise back to the NACEP website and look at upcoming webinars under our events tab. But we've got a K-12 perspective on dual enrollment coming from the peer-reviewed research side of the house. So we're going to dig into 3 or 4 different studies on that to learn about the perspective of value and impact on the K-12 side. And then we will be sending out details in the future about the Quality Institute in August. Next slide. Oh, that's the last one. We're all good. Thanks all for making time and joining us today. Thanks to all of you that tuned in and are watching this after the fact. And a big thank you to all of our presenters to help us keep that focus on the student mindset, the student experience, and how can we empower and hit that high level for every student and innovate across the board for that. Thanks so much, everybody.
Amy and Renee, can we quickly go back to the slide, just about 3 slides that has everybody's email, because we kind of zip through that really fast, and I think that would give everybody an opportunity to ask those questions of the presenters. And again, like Amy, thank you, everyone.
Yep, and they are in the chat. If you can scroll back, you can get the direct link there. Thanks all.
I'll add to that right before we close up, that I know based on previous sessions, questions have come up along the way, and the presenters and our friends at NACEP have been really receptive and to fielding those questions outside of this webinar venue. So I would encourage you, if you're from one of our districts or from one of our IHEs and you have a thought after this question, please do take them up on this offer to provide their perspective and perhaps some insight to you. So I would encourage you to do that. I think this relationship can be quite valuable to all of us. So thank you everyone for coming. We're going to wrap up. We're right at the top of the hour. Thank you to our panelists, to our NACEP friends, to everyone who was here today, to those of you who are listening to the recording. We appreciate the partnership and we hope you have a good rest of the day.